You know, it's none of my business, but don't you think taking riding lessons is a pretty expensive way to meet a girl?
The message was absolutely unmistakable. This was the way your life should be. And if it wasn't, something must be very wrong.
Everyone watched Ozzie and Harriet and assumed that everyone they knew lived that life. And then they went around pretending that they lived it too. But no one really did. Even Ozzie and Harriet didn't. So, on some level, there's been a myth all along. And part of the plague of the 50s was the incredible personal efforts, the incredible pain involved in perpetuating that myth about one's own family, about one's own happiness in that family, about the health of that family.
They saw women as feeling very discontented. They saw husbands feel pressured, harried by the demands of their jobs and families, and they saw children as feeling extremely alienated. So clearly, I think many of the roots of the 60s explosions were planted in the supposedly placid family of the 1950s.
This boy and girl coming home from school look quite content with life. They're looking forward to an important date, dinner at home with the family.
Though they seem artificial today, educational films like this one, which were shown to school children all over America, accurately reflect the attitudes and values of white middle-class society in the 1950s, when real-life documentaries were few and far between.
Doesn't that sound exciting to you?
Their purpose was to teach kids the proper way to behave, and to repeat and reinforce a set of rules.
The rules were things you talked about on the telephone with your friends, and they were imposed by your parents. Parents talked about it a lot. There were high school counselors who told you what the rules were, and even if they weren't written down, everybody really knew, and you could almost read them out, cite them. And I think looking back on it from the 60s, what people did in the 60s was self-consciously break every damn one of them.
The women of this family seem to feel that they owe it to the men of the family to look relaxed, rested, and attractive at dinner time. Brother notices the time and realizes that he must put things in order and clean himself up in time for dinner.
What were the rules? One of them was obey authority. Don't ask questions. In the 60s, millions of young people would renounce that one.
These boys greet their dad as though they are genuinely glad to see him, as though they had really missed being away from him during the day and are anxious to talk to him. This is the time for pleasant discussion in a thoroughly relaxed mood. They don't pick this time of the day to spring unpleasant surprises on Dad.
We are molding our boys the way we feel they should be molded in the 50s. I think you have to start molding right away when they're just infants. And so that was our influence. We tried to make this a very influential time, a constructive time, through Boy Scouts, through church, through Cub Scouts, through Little League, or not Little League, but the little pony leagues or whatever they had, you know, these little kids. It was awfully cute. Yeah, they were fun times with our kids, with our boys. We had a great time.
Let father and mother guide the conversational trend if they desire. After all, they made all this possible.
My impression of that time was that a child was to be seen and not heard, and that we were never allowed to express anything that was negative. We were never allowed to talk back in any way, even to question why should I do something or could I do it later. We weren't treated as if we were people. We were another species.
Another rule, control your emotions. In the 60s, masses of baby boomers would reverse this one and, quote, let it all hang out.
Oh, I'm so happy. I could be a model. Or a cover girl.
Hey, what's gotten into that crazy kid's sister?
Oh, Jeff, don't be that way.
Notice how Mother seems to become angry herself because of Jeff's anger. Perhaps she shouldn't, but anger is a violent emotion, and we often see an induction of behavior, or spread of emotion to other persons, almost like a contagious disease.
If you misbehaved, you weren't normal. And the idea of normal is a kind of vegetative state where nothing happens. But that's what everybody tried to aspire to. But I think it's a word that people are constantly using to exhort you to behave better. Why don't you be normal? It's not normal to wear your hair long. It's not normal to wear Levi's. It's not normal to listen to rock and roll. It's not normal to read comic books. There's a whole list of a million things that everybody does that isn't normal.
Well, what makes you think they look at your clothes?
Oh, because the other fellas wear sweaters or just shirts, not a regular suit like mine.
Well, wear a sweater then.
Another rule, fit in with the group. Don't stand out. Conform in your actions and your appearance. In the 60s, great numbers of young people would, quote, do their own thing.
Pick out the most popular boys and girls in school and keep an eye on them. Try to figure out why people like them. Not that you'll ever be just like any of them, but you might learn something. Well, see you there.
Many young people found these restrictions painfully repressive, but they struggled to obey them anyhow because if they didn't, they knew there'd be unpleasant consequences from society or from their peers.
Yoo-hoo!
Jenny thinks that she has the key to popularity, parking in cars with the boys at night. When Jerry brags about taking Jenny out, he learns that she dates all the boys. What about Jenny? Does that make her really popular? Do the boys and girls like her? Is she welcome to join this group?
Hi, Betty. Ellie. You can rest your tray here, Jenny, for a minute. Thanks. Say, Wally, how's the play coming along?
Oh, okay, Jenny. Here, Jenny.
No,
Thanks, Jerry.
girls who park in cars are not really popular. Not even with the boys they park with. Not when they meet at school or elsewhere.
Nothing like being Miss Popularity. Yeah.
I think that there was this sense that, yeah, well, sure, they're using sex to be popular now, but, you know, what about in the future? They're going to be, like, thrown in the rubbish pile. And I think that did happen because I think that boys did maintain an attitude of, you know, they wanted to get laid, but they wanted to marry a virgin.
Jeff, isn't that Eileen?
It sure is, baby and all.
Gee, I haven't seen her since she left school.
And maybe this was the biggest rule of all. Don't even think about having sex. In the 60s, young people all over the country would proclaim, if it feels good, do it.
Mary, wait, please. Sorry, Mary.
In the height of emotion, it's not always easy to stop and think things through. But if you'll just slow down the rush and pressure of your feelings a little, then judgment has a better chance to take hold and guide you away from wrong behavior.
It was sort of a nightmare. Looking from the outside, I'm sure it didn't seem that way to an observer, but for me, I felt so lonely. I was popular, and I didn't have those problems. I wasn't a nerd or anything like that, but there just wasn't anybody from my planet, is the way that I kind of described it. I felt like I had so much bottled up inside of me.
What startles me when I look back at my yearbook photos now, they all look so old. Everybody looks so old. I mean, they look like little adults. You know, they don't, it's startling to me how old, how already getting into the groove all of these people look with their flat top crew cuts. And then ever so often, you know, you turn the page and you see the guy with the ducktail. And, you know, here's the rebel.
Being a rebel by slicking your hair back and wearing a black leather jacket seems harmless now. But in the 1950s, many adults saw this as the first sign of teenagers going bad.
Many teenagers are as concerned as their parents with the public's conception of today's youth. these students are portraying what we consider bad taste in school attire and behavior.